As a child, it's a serious offense to discuss Bruce Lee without demonstrating at least one of his signature moves or discussing a scene from one of his films. Bruce Lee is unquestionably everyone's hero and philosopher. Even by today's standards, Bruce Lee is considered the greatest fighter of all time. But there are some facts about your real-life hero you may not be aware of. Stay tuned, and I'll let you in on this little secret. Number 10. Bruce Lee's demise still has mysterious elements. For a powerful man like Bruce Lee, who many believe to be an immortal superhuman, to pass away at the age of 32 doesn't really make sense. Rumors about his demise have been spreading since then, with many coming up with different theories of what caused it. Some say it was due to his drug habits. Back in the day, Bruce Lee was known to chew cannabis, as was the habit of many wealthy individuals in Hong Kong. Some believe that there was a hand of a woman, supposedly his mistress, who was the last to see him alive. Some believe that it was vengeance from Hong Kong drug gangs because he taught martial arts to non-Chinese people. Well, sit tight as we go back to the summer of 1973 to find out what really happened to him. Hopefully, you'll be convinced that's how the events rolled up. Bruce Lee and his family were spending half the summer where Bruce Lee was there on business, finishing up Enter the Dragon and shooting the new film Game of Death with Raymond Chow and his director. On July 20th, Bruce Lee got up as usual and did his morning routine, which included working out as usual. After that, he went to work on his script for the movie, Enter the Dragon. As we're all aware of Lee's cannabis habits, somewhere around that time, he ate a substantial amount of cannabis as he believed it kept him overly focused. At 1 p.m. that day, he drove to his mistress in her apartment where they got intimate and had some more weed. He later complained of having a headache, and out of curiosity, his mistress got him some Aquagesic painkillers and he went to rest. At around 9 p.m., his director started calling his cell phone, and that's when they realized that Bruce Lee wasn't waking up. Bruce Lee didn't make it to the hospital. Doctors believe the drugs he'd previously taken had a negative reaction with his cerebral edema, leading to his demise. To this day, doctors still believe it was cerebral edema that led to his death. But still, this isn't enough for the countless fans he had. The involvement of Bruce Lee's mistress still raises eyebrows, making it look like a big conspiracy. Number 9. His parents decided he should learn martial arts after seeing him get into street fights. Bruce Lee grew up in Hong Kong with his parents and siblings. Because of his small body size, he was occasionally bullied by his fellow students. However, Bruce Lee wasn't one to give up easily. So in every fight, he always made sure he put up a good one. Later, his parents saw that it was getting out of hand and decided to take him to a martial arts school so that he could learn to fight properly, where he began training with his master at the age of 16 years old. Well, that didn't stop him from getting into street fights. In fact, he went to those who had martial arts training like him and gave them a good challenge until one day he got into a fight with a kid connected to the underground crime scene of Hong Kong and defeated him. His parents had to ship him to America, where his father lived with only $800 after discovering there was a bounty placed on his head. Number 8. Ipman was actually Bruce Lee's master. Many people know Ipman from his action movies. Honestly, the man is an absolute punching machine with outstanding calmness. Bruce Lee started training with the Grand Master Ipman, who taught him the style of Wing Chun back in the 1950s. Unfortunately, because the Grand Master had several students, he assigned Bruce Lee to a senior student, Wang Chonglong, as his primary teacher. Bruce Lee upheld his focus until the minute he started training personally with Grandmaster Ip. Bruce Lee, motivated to become a skilled fighter, worked hard and made great strides under Wang's coaching. Ipman, who trained with Lee and helped him develop a profound and significant grasp of the philosophical side of Kung Fu, wasn't surprised by his commitment to be the greatest at Kung Fu. We've all heard the saying that a good student always outshines the master eventually. Some students do, but I don't think Bruce Lee ever got there, despite his deadly skills. Yeah, Bruce Lee was great, but his master was just phenomenal. Apart from Ipman molding the most talented kung fu fighters in history, he was also very influential in Bruce Lee's philosophical life, with quotes like, "Empty your minds, be formless, like water." Number 7. Kid refuses to train with him when they knew his ancestry. Growing up in Hong Kong impacted Bruce Lee's interpersonal interactions. Bullying at school, street fights, and discrimination are all instances. Because of Bruce Lee's father's status as an actor and his father's outstanding devotion to and success in martial arts, Bruce Lee was somewhat privileged as a child. So the kids started talking down to him and demanding that he be expelled. And when they couldn't come up with a good reason, they blamed it on his Caucasian origin. His fellow students in Wing Chun School always hated him and argued that Master Ip shouldn't teach martial arts to people who were of mixed origin. Master Ip gave it a deaf ear because he was so impressed with Bruce Lee's performance that it made him see no reason for kicking him out. I guess that's why Bruce Lee got so good at martial arts, since most of the time he was either training with the master or his primary assigned teacher. Number 6. Bruce Lee's last film was produced after his demise. Inarguably, Bruce Lee had an extraordinary acting talent. For some reason, while Bruce Lee was starring in the movie Enter the Dragon, he was also working on the film Game of Death, which was to be featured as the second Hollywood martial arts film. Unfortunately, his demise halted the filming of Game of Death on July 20th, 1973. The movie's progress was stopped and had to be released in 1978, years after his passing. Despite his absence in the film Enter the Dragon made the headlines, and it was among the top-selling martial arts movies of all time. Number 5. Bruce Lee was only 5'7". When you watch Bruce Lee movies, it's hard to believe that a man who could take down anybody no matter their size was only 5'7" and weighed 140 pounds. It's kind of impossible if you ask me. We can agree on the weight because he had a pretty fit body, because he stayed away from fatty foods. He made his main menus from regiments cut out of flour and strictly ate small amounts throughout the day. If you're keen enough, you'll see how Bruce Lee was short in his fight scene between him and the former NBA star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It's pretty amazing how much damage a 5'7" could do to a 7'2" without fear, since size didn't really matter to him. I mean, if I was in that kind of fight, I'd tap out at the slightest chance I got. Number 4. Lee trained numerous Hollywood celebrities. In his lifetime, Bruce Lee's ability in martial arts influenced so many people. Nowadays, not only people who were born in Bruce Lee's era, but also kids who've only seen his movies love him. He set the bar for all actors who love martial arts, like James Coburn, who starred in the famous film The Magnificent Seven. He also trained with Chuck Norris, who's well known for his movie Delta Force. Bruce Lee has also been a great influence on James Bond, who's still making it in Hollywood, especially with his movie No Time to Die and George Lazenby. He also trained with the all-time favorite stuntman Jackie Chan, who some think is better than Bruce Lee. I think this argument is displaced, so let's not try to compare the two. Number 3. Bruce Lee developed his own martial arts style. It's crazy how many considered a fighting style for women turned out to be the deadliest in martial arts history. I'm talking about Master Ipman's fighting style. Despite the respect he got from many Chinese masters, Master Ip's fighting style was despised just because it came from monks, and many masters thought it was non-lethal and a good way to lose. After years of training with Bruce Lee, his student finally mastered the art and made something new out of it. Bruce Lee invented the Jeet Kune Do, whose main goal was to anticipate an attack and stop it before it happened. Most of the movies in this style are legal in mixed martial arts, MMA, proving their effectiveness. Though the art took a long time to become known because of the years of detailed study, it's been of great help to the martial arts universe. Number 2. Bruce Lee failed a military physical. In 1963, Bruce Lee was summoned before the draft board for possible induction into the Army in the United States. Bruce Lee was capable of joining the Army because of his location and that America was his birth country, making him a citizen. Unfortunately, the board deemed him unfit for combat for many different reasons that vary from source to source. Some say that he was rejected because of his eyesight, which required him to wear very thick glasses to see. Others claim that the Army rejected him because of his undescended testicles, while others claim that one leg was shorter than the other. It's difficult to say who was correct, but I believe the American Army gave up on this incredible fighter too soon. Number 1. Bruce Lee had a drug issue. Because of his good performances on stage and in the ring, it's hard for many to believe that Bruce Lee had a drug problem. In reality, Lee was known to use a particular potent strain of Nepalese hashish, a habit that only became more prevalent following the martial artist's major back injury and ensuing chronic agony in 1970. Despite his absence from alcohol and tobacco, Hollywood gossiped about his drug habit without any proof, until letters from him requesting drugs from his student Robert Baker proved his usage and his dependence. According to Robert Baker, Bruce Lee went to shoot films while high on cocaine, LSD, or cannabis on multiple occasions. Following his death, the auctioning of his letters, and the autopsy of his body, all of this was discovered. Until next time, adios.